This is Seventh Generation Warfare, and I'm your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we'll be continuing to look at ReadySide Up, in particular, community classification. If you don't remember, ReadySide Up is a form of, in essence, prepping, but it goes into both natural, societal, and personal disasters um, to give you readiness, resiliency, and self reliance. And we do this by looking at 7 different classifications: food, water, shelter, uh, security, economics, community, and fitness. So, in this episode, we are looking at community. If any of those other topics interest you, go check out the playlist to watch those. So, community. This is friends, family, neighbors, and acquaintances. How can we leverage these people if we need to when disaster strikes? And it's going to depend greatly on the type of disaster that strikes. But we should be thinking ahead of time of how we are establishing our communities and what kind of influences, what kind of interactions we're having with people. You don't want to be pissing off everyone in your neighborhood because they're not going to help you when you need it. And likewise, you might not want to move away from all your family and friends, etc. So, if I was, and all these this is a questionnaire I used to help people develop their readiness, resiliency, and self reliance. So, these are the questions I asked them to get the conversation rolling. And from it, more conversation would start, and we could look at different avenues of how they could better their readiness posture. So dependents. Do you have dependents? How many dependents? What are their relationship to you? Where do they live? What kind of skills they might have, those sort of things. That also goes with friends, number, location. This might be even more pertaining to, whereas dependents might be more of a liability for you, friends might actually be more of and by liability I mean in terms of they're having to feed them, they are accrued financial cost to you. You have to support them financially. So if it was a personal disaster where you got hurt, or if it was, and I'm thinking as a man, as a provider, as a protector here, if it was a doomsday scenario and you had to, protect him with firearms, like you might be the only one protecting him against the violent marauders, right? But they might also have capabilities. But friends are going to have all kinds of skills, and hopefully, maybe your friends aren't just in the same professional field as you. Perhaps they have all kinds of skills. Local family, I'm talking here more about extended family. What kind of relationship you have with these people, and number and location. Your family skills, again, hopefully it's not just professional skills, though. It's interests. If you have an aunt who really likes to knit, well, if economic hard times really come, you might, or say the United States pisses off China really, and clothes stop coming from China, it's possible we'll have to make clothes more locally, or something like that. So what kind of skills people might have. Do you know somebody who is very mechanically minded and might be able to fix your car? Or even if you know somebody who's mechanically minded, try to figure out how mechanically minded are they. Could they do an oil change basically on any type of vehicle? Could they change brakes? Is that the limit of it? Could they pull an engine out and repair an engine? How mechanically minded are they, right? This also goes next to your known neighbors. So most Americans live in pretty densely populated areas, include not only cities but suburbs, where if you could if you could yell and your neighbor could hear you, then you have a lot of people in your area that could potentially be useful for you, and you should consider what these people can offer and what you can offer them. But known neighbors, and then unknown neighbors. So I'd be asking my clients, getting a sense of how well they've interacted with their community, and perhaps encouraging them to go and knock on some doors and introduce themselves. If you if you live, say, on a cul-de-sac, you should know everyone on the cul-de-sac. Um, it doesn't mean you have to be friends with the people, and especially when I was doing these type of questionnaires, it was during shortly after COVID lockdowns and things like that, and there was definitely a lot of political differences of like, oh, we don't want to interact with those people because they're crazy to the other side of the political spectrum, and I think you have to get over that. A lot of the politics that divides people is really only superficial. A lot of people are not actually all that fanatical. They really do care, or realize, even if they don't care pragmatically, they understand that being on good terms with the people in their community takes precedent over, what a ideological position they might have on federal politics or something. So they'll be friendly and cordial, and they'll work in mutual benefit. They will trade and be neighborly to you. So you might just need to start those connections, because a lot of people are shy and timid as well. So being the one to go forth and make those connections can yield great benefit. So with your neighbors, again, what kind of skills they might have. Maybe you have a secret green thumb. Maybe you're not a gardener yourself, but your neighbor is excellent at gardening. There, my neighbor told me, somebody doesn't have any friends if you see them buying zucchini in a grocery store in August, because if you have friends who garden, they're going to have a plethora of zucchini and they're going to be looking to give it away. So it's just a funny way to look at that situation. But so yeah, and giving away produce and things like that is just something that people will do just because they got a good yield and they don't want it. Imagine if times are really hard for either just you or for the community as a whole, how the people could really come in handy. So start utilizing those skills. Next, we'd be looking at, going more into acquaintances. I'd be asking about if people are members of churches or other memberships, either professional memberships, Rotary Club, some sort of networking group, anything like that, and what they know about the people in these groups. The point I'm getting at from asking about all these different types of people is there is likely hundreds of people that on more than a first name basis, that you are at least somewhat have elevated interactions with that go slightly above how is the weather. Um, if you have interactions with people that you ever talk about anything at all meaningful, then you're going to be able to utilize those people when disaster strikes. Now, for those other people that even just plain acquaintances that you know very little about, if you're in front of them, say at a church or a professional organization or something like that, you can also work on your skills of developing those relationships. And it's too easy to just stay not building connections. And if you keep the readiness posture in your mind, I got to build readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance. And then every interaction you have, hopefully you're thinking, how can I bring this person more value so that I can build my community. This can be completely selfish, if that's the way you need to frame it in your mind in order to do it. And if you're uncomfortable striking up conversation with pretty much strangers, think think of like who your core people are that you have the support and love and caring of, the people who are not going to abandon you. Use those people as your emotional support, basically. That and mentally you can say, even if I embarrass myself horribly in front of a whole group of people, or even just an individual you're trying to strike a conversation up, well, screw it. I still have a good collection of people that I know and can trust. I always have them. I don't need to worry. What I'm doing now is going above and beyond, trying to do extra, trying to make a new connection, trying to build my community. If I screw it up, and this is if you're a self-conscious person, if I screw it up, oh well. I'll take it as a learning opportunity, and I'll do better at building connection the next time. But in reality, you don't actually screw it up. Um, Sometimes when interacting with strangers, there can be some sort of embarrassing or weird moments, but I think as you do it more and more, you'll develop the courage to just kind of roll through uh, the ice breaking phase, if you will. Members, going back to, and this, I might actually have brought this up in the economic section when talking about employment, but where are these people employed? What kind of coworkers might they have in their business, and what kind of interaction they have with their coworkers? Now, with people like coworkers and say members of a church, it might never really come up, what somebody's hobbies are, or especially employment, say you work like a trade of some sort or something hands on, it might never really consider that they have other skills. If people work in like an office type job, then you presume they have a hobby. Maybe not. Maybe they just go home and watch TV, and do nothing when they get out of work, or they go and drink. Um, but finding time in those environments to get to know people, and people love talking about what they're interested in. So if you can find in one of these environments like a coworker, and could be as simple as starting to talk about what they did the past weekend. If they let on that they did something, they could say, "Oh, I worked on my house." Like, oh, maybe this person has some construction experience. What did you do on your house? And then they get into it, and you can start asking a bunch of questions. And this doesn't even have to be for a disaster situation. You might actually just be able to generally learn. If you're a paper pusher, you don't know anything about working on a house, maybe from this coworker you can gain the experience to do some minor remodeling projects yourself. So uh, people are a great resource. I guess the greatest resource, is kind of the point of this chapter. And before we close out, it's really just a summary of all the people that you know, and what their skills are, and how they might be able to help you, either in day-to-day life or in specific disaster scenarios. And you will have to reference back to what your disaster concerns are and see how you can piece those people in. But Ready Side Up is about readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance. And when I write this out, I usually put the S in self in lowercase, because it's really not. The self-reliance is there, that you can only ever fully rely on yourself but the greatest strength comes from when you have community. So the goal of self-reliance is not actually to be fully self-reliant. It's to have the confidence and know-how that you can get through any scenario that comes your way relying only on yourself. But only an idiot would try to go through life only relying on themselves. Rely on your community, think about your community, understand what their capabilities and what their limitations are. And then when you understand, especially what their limitations are, then you can work on correcting those limitations. And that might actually bring forth a financial or market opportunity if you realize in your community that your community is lacking a certain skill or ability. You might be able to fulfill that and get great gain from it. So I hope that gives you some things to think about when it comes to community and being ready side up. Think family, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances. This is Seventh Generation Warfare. I am your current host, John Nelson. I'll see you on the next one where we talk about fitness. Have a good night.